Assalamu alaikum and welcome, dear students and dear viewers. This is Qaisar Bashir. Dear students, in today's video, we're going to discuss and study another beautiful poem which I have selected from class 8 English textbook Tulip series. Dear students, the poem that we are going to talk about, we are going to discuss and study in today's video is titled as Summer and Winter. The students, let me tell you, in today's video, I'll give the introduction about the poet and the poem. I'll read the poem for you as well. I'll give the detailed explanation of the poem. And I'll also talk about the rhyming words and the images that the poet has used in this poem, which is titled as Summer and Winter. Dear students, before we go ahead, I'd like to tell you that this poem is written by one of the greatest, one of the most famous, one of the most radical poets of romantic movement, and his name is Percy Bysshe Shelley, and he is popularly known as P.B. Shelley, right? And he was born on 4th August 1792 and he died on 8th July 1822. Dear students, now let's study, let's read the poem. Let me give you the reading of the poem first, right? The poet says that it was a bright and cheerful afternoon towards the end of the sunny month of June, and the north wind congregates in the crowds, the floating mountains of the silver clouds from the horizon, and the stainless sky opens beyond them like eternity. All things rejoice beneath the sun, the weeds, the river, and the cornfields, and the reeds, the willow leaves that glanced in the light breeze, and the firm foliage of the larger trees. It was a winter such as when birds die in the deep forests, and the fishes lie stiffened in the translucent ice, which makes even the mud and the slime of the warm lakes a wrinkled clod as hard as brook. And when among their children comfortable men gather about great fires, and yet feel cold, alas then, for the homeless beggar old. Dear students, this was the poem for you. And in the very beginning of the poem, our poet Percy Bysshe Shelley says that he talks about the beauties of summer and says that it was a bright and cheerful afternoon towards the end of the sunny month of June. So he actually talks about a day, about a season, the bright day, the sunny day, and it's actually the end of the month of June. And cheerful afternoon, it was so beautiful, it was so loving, it was so cherishing, when the north wind congregates in crowds. And it was the time when the north wind actually congregate the crowds, the floating mountains, the floating mountains of what? The silver clouds. So he tells us that these clouds are actually the floating mountains, and what actually congregates them in crowds, it's actually the wind. What wind? It's actually the northern wind, right? And then he goes on to say these silver clouds, they actually gather to where the mountain or to where the earth and the sky seems to meet. It's actually the place called, it's actually called in English horizon, right? So these clouds gather at a place called horizon, right? And the sun and the sky looks clear, it looks stainless, right? And it seems as if there is eternity to for example, see, there's everything open, our eyes go as far as they can, right? So in this in these lines, the poet actually talks about the beauty of the summer, the June afternoon, right? And he also tells us how these northern winds, actually making the onlookers see as if the mountains, as if these clouds are floating mountains, right? And then he talks about how everything looks beautiful, the clear sky, right? And then he says that everything looked beautiful, everything looked more beautiful, right? Whether it was it were the weeds, it was the river, it were the cornfields, or the reeds, and the willow leaves that glanced in the light breeze, everything that was on the earth looked bright, looked pleasing, looked joyous, looked more, engaging, looked more arresting. And the firm foliage of the larger trees, even the leaves that were on the bigger trees, they also, looked firm, also looked strong. Even the winds could not, make them fall down, could not just uproot them from their twigs, right? And then the poet goes on to discuss the difficulties, the problems that common men and animals and birds equally face in the season of winter. Dear students, in the first stanza, the poet actually talked about summer, the beauties of summer, the pleasures of summer, and then he makes a shift, and this shift we call in English volta, right? Then he makes a shift, and then he talks about winter. He says that it was a winter. The season was winter. It was snowing, such as when birds die. It was the season when birds die, where they die in the deep forests. Why do these birds die? Because they don't get enough food. They feel cold. They don't have places where they can hide, right? And the fishes lie stiffened in the translucent ice. And in this season of winter, there's so much cold. Even the fishes that swim freely in the season of summer cannot do like that in winter, because in winter it's so cold, so frigid that they get stiffened, they get stuck in the translucent ice. Rather, they become the ice. Okay. And dear students, then he talks about the other problems, other difficulties that actually we face, or the people or the animals face in winter, and then which makes even the mud and the slime on the warm lakes a wrinkled clod as hard as brick. And it is the season when the mud and the slime become as hard as brick, right? So it is the season which makes even the liquid things become solid, right? And then he goes on to say that and when among their children comfortable men gather about great fires. And he talks, and the poet then talks about those people who are rich, who have good homes, who have the facilities like gas heaters, room heaters, etc., hammams, etc. But still, they cannot control themselves. They cannot, stop themselves from getting cold. Even these people who have such, good facilities, feel difficulties and problems like cold, etc. And then he talks about those people who are actually homeless, who don't have their a home of their own, right? Or who don't have their own homes. This is why the poet says, alas then for the homeless beggar old. He talks about those people who are old, who are homeless. Here the poet seems socially concerned, right? He seems socially aware about all these difficulties that the poor people, the homeless and the old or the beggar people face in the season of winter. So I think this is a beautiful poem wherein the poet talks about, rather compares two different seasons, the first looking more welcoming, the more pleasant, and the second more dark, more deadly and more harsh. One more thing, if we talk of the symbol or symbolism in the poem, summer represents life and winter represents lifelessness. Dear students, let me talk about the rhyming words. The poet has used a number of rhyming words in this poem. Rather, this poem is, confess or replete with the rhyming words like afternoon, June, weeds, reeds, makes, lakes, crowds, clouds, breeze, trees, when, men, sky, eternity. Dear students, note the exact pronunciation of the word is eternity, but to give the poem the rhythmic effect or rhyming effect, we have to pronounce it here as eternity. So sky, eternity, die, lie, cold, old. So these are the words which the poet has used as rhyming words in the poem. Dear students, now let me talk about the images that the poet has used in this poem to make this poem more pictorial, to make this poem more beautiful. The images, there are a lot of images that the poet has used. Some images for the season summer and some images for the season winter. If we talk of these images, the first image that comes in our mind is mountains, forests, and then we have other images like weeds, clouds, sky, sun, cornfields, willow leaves, trees, mud, clod, brick, rivers, lakes, translucent ice, children, men, beggars, etc. This was all about today's video, and if you like this video, consider sharing it, and if you are new on this channel, please do subscribe.